I cheated on my boyfriend and I regret it. I think about confessing, but I know there are things we carry with us forever. But this one made it hard to breathe. It wasn't out of revenge or cruelty. It was quick, confusing, and by the time I realized it, it was already too late. The problem is, he still looks at me like I'm everything he believes in, and that breaks me inside. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that he knows, that even without proof, his body has already felt the distance I created with my silence. And now I carry a question that won't let me rest. Do I tell him or keep pretending? The truth is, I regret it. But what if confessing is just another way to hurt him? It's strange how something no one saw can weigh so heavily. The betrayal left no visible marks. There were no screams, no fights, no slamming doors. But from that day on, something inside me changed. And no matter how hard I try to carry on as if nothing happened, my body gives me away. My silence became noise. My presence became absence. And his gaze, once so calm, now feels like a mirror silently judging me. It was just once. One night when everything was wrong. He and I had argued, and I went out with friends trying to distract myself, trying to prove to myself that I wasn't as vulnerable as I felt. But I was. And in that weakness, I allowed what I never imagined I would. It wasn't with a stranger. Worse, it was with someone who had shown interest before. Someone I had always turned down until that day. The next day, there were no talks, no second time, no what if, just silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that I still carry. Waking up next to my boyfriend the next morning was like facing a version of myself I no longer recognized. He looked at me with affection, kissed my forehead, and asked if I was feeling better. I wanted to throw up. Not because of him, because of me, because of the woman I was that night, and the woman he still thinks I am. Since then, everything has changed. Not in big gestures, but in the details. The way I avoid his gaze when he speaks with emotion. The extreme care I take not to leave my phone lying around. The guilt hidden behind little acts of affection that now feel like silent apologies. But he doesn't know. At least I don't think he does. It feels like I'm playing a role all the time. Smiling at the right moments. Pretending to be calm. Making up excuses so I don't seem too distant. It's exhausting. And at the same time, it feels like I'm trying to preserve something I already destroyed. The cruelest part of it all is that he's still him. Attentive, patient, loving. He makes plans for the future. Talks about trips, laughs at my jokes even when they're not funny. And me? I watch it all as if I no longer deserve to be there. And maybe I don't. Sometimes I think about telling him, just to get the weight off my chest. But then I think about what comes after. The way he'll look at me, the trust collapsing, the pain I caused coming back like a broken mirror, each shard reflecting a part of the woman he'll never see the same way again. I've tried to justify it to myself. It was a mistake, that's all. Everyone makes mistakes. I was vulnerable. But none of those lines comfort me at night. None of them convince me that what I did can be forgotten. Yes, I regret it. But that regret follows me like a shadow that grows every time he treats me with kindness, as if every gesture is a reminder of how much of a coward I was. Some nights he goes to bed early, and I stay on the couch, alone, scrolling through my phone, doing nothing, just existing with this secret. And in those moments, silence becomes a cell, and I'm the prisoner who locked herself in. Sometimes I catch myself looking at him and wondering, what if he finds out? What if someone tells him? What if he already knows and is just waiting for me to say something? My mind spirals endlessly, because when you cheat, you don't just betray the other person. You betray the version of yourself you promised to be. And living with that every day is like walking in shoes that hurt, but you can't take them off. I still love him, and maybe that's what hurts the most. Knowing that even loving him, I was capable of doing something that could destroy him, and that even though I'm filled with remorse, I might end up choosing silence, not out of protection, but out of fear. Fear of losing him, fear of losing myself. But isn't staying silent in itself a way of losing everything? To confess, or to hide, to tell the truth, or to protect the one you love, to carry this weight alone, or to share the pain with someone who doesn't deserve to feel it. None of these choices feel right, but at the same time, pretending nothing happened is draining me from the inside. I've rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, in the mirror, in the shower, in traffic, in my head. I've started with, I need to tell you something. I've imagined saying it in a cold, direct way. No emotion, just ripping off the bandage. And I've imagined falling apart with tears, trying to show how deeply sorry I am. But every time I think about it, one question stops me in my tracks. Do I want to confess to ease my conscience, or to try to save something that might already be lost? There's a huge difference between being honest and just unloading guilt. And what if what I'm calling the truth is really just a way to dump on him the weight I can't carry alone? I've read about this. Articles, forums, videos from psychologists, and they all say the same thing in different words. The truth can set you free, but it can also destroy. Some people confess hoping for redemption, and are met with silence. Others confess and feel relief, but never forget the look of pain in the other person's eyes. I keep wondering if he would forgive me, if he would understand it was a moment of weakness, if he'd still look at me with the same tenderness after hearing everything, and to be honest, I don't think he would. And that's where the dilemma comes in. Do I tell him and risk losing the man I love? Or do I stay quiet and carry this ghost with me every day? Sometimes I feel like, if he had cheated on me, I'd forgive him. Not easily, of course, but maybe, with time. But the thing is, I'm not him, and people's hearts don't work the same way. Some people can't separate the mistake from the love, and some, no matter how much they love, won't look back after trust is broken. I wonder if he's ever done something like this. I've never had any reason to doubt him, but now I understand that no one needs to leave clues to make a mistake. Sometimes it just takes the wrong place, the wrong time, and the wrong pain inside your chest. And then comes the question that hurts even more. If I tell him, will he understand, or will he just use it as a reason to walk away for good? I'm constantly torn between two kinds of pain, the pain of pretending and the pain of destroying something that might still be saved. There's no right answer, only the fear of making the wrong choice. By the way, if you've been through something similar or overcame a pain that once felt impossible, drop your best email in the comments. If you'd like me to turn your story into a video, I'll personally reach out, because some pain, when shared, becomes strength for someone else. Sometimes all someone needs is to know they're not alone. Back to my dilemma. I watch him sleeping and imagine what it would be like to tell him everything. I picture the reaction, the silence, the anger, the disgust, the heartbreak. I try to find a way to soften it, to make it seem like it was just a slip. But the truth is, it wasn't. No one just trips and cheats. We choose it, even if it's impulsive, even if regret hits right after. It was a choice, mine. And no matter how much I torture myself about it, that fact won't change. I've thought about writing a letter, about disappearing, about making up some excuse to end things, just to spare him the pain. But wouldn't that also be cowardice? Leaving someone without explanation, just because I don't want to face the mess I made? Every time I try to sleep, the anxiety comes back. It suffocates me, and the fear of losing him mixes with the shame of still being by his side without telling him the truth. It's an internal war, with no villain or heroine. Just a woman who made a mistake, and doesn't know where to hide from her own reflection. I used to think that regret was enough. That feeling guilty, carrying the pain, crying alone in the shower would somehow balance the scales, as if, by suffering afterward, what I did before would lose its weight. But it doesn't. Regret doesn't erase the mistake. It only confirms it. I spent weeks trying to justify what happened with phrases like, "I wasn't myself that night," or "It was just a moment of weakness." And yes, maybe it was, but that doesn't change anything. The consequence remained. The damage remained. And the worst part is realizing that feeling remorse doesn't change the fact that he's still being deceived. I've caught myself many times imagining him finding out everything, but in that painful fantasy, I'm always just sorry enough to deserve forgiveness, as if suffering afterward made up for what I did, as if he were obligated to forgive me just because I cried, lost my appetite, and isolated myself. That, in reality, is just ego. It's trying to turn the pain I caused into pain we share. And that's not justice. It's a transfer of weight. One thing that's hard to admit is that I only began to grasp the gravity of what I'd done when I saw how good he kept being to me. Because if he had been cold, distant, or harsh, maybe I would have used that as an excuse. He pushed me to this, but no, he was kind, he was loyal, and even then, I broke something that may never be whole again. We like to believe we're good people just because we feel guilt. But guilt isn't a sign of goodness. It's just a reminder that we failed someone who didn't deserve it. And in this case, it's not just him I hurt, it's me too, because I know how hard I fought to become a better, more mature, more conscious version of myself, and in a single moment, I threw that all away. Some days I wake up thinking I can handle it, that I can move on, that time will soften the edges. But then he shows me affection, tells me he loves me, talks about our future, and it all comes flooding back. Like every word he says is a mirror showing me who I could have been and wasn't. One of the worst feelings is this, knowing that, no matter what happens, even if I confess, even if he forgives me, I'll never again be the woman he sees. I'll never again deserve that look that believes in me without hesitation. And this isn't drama, it's a fact. It's understanding that regret doesn't fix anything. It shows that we care, yes, but it doesn't mend what's broken. I remember a conversation I had with a friend, weeks after the betrayal. I told her everything, tearfully, hoping for comfort, some consolation. And what she said has stuck with me ever since. You're not regretful. You're scared. Scared of losing him. Scared of being found out. But true regret doesn't seek relief. It accepts punishment. At the time, I was angry. I felt judged. But now, maybe she was right. I don't want to confess to be punished. I want to confess because I can't take this weight anymore. And there's the problem. When the goal is to feel better, the truth loses its value. It becomes a bargaining chip, an emotional plea. Forgive me because I'm suffering. But would he really want to ease my pain by carrying his? The cruelest thing about regret is that it has no form. It doesn't show. It's not like a visible wound that bleeds and draws care. It's invisible, and because of that, it's lonely. I don't want him to find out from someone else. I don't want him to discover it by accident, but I also don't know if I have the strength to destroy the world he still believes is safe. And while I remain stuck between what I did and what I could do, life goes on. Quiet dinners, laughs on the couch, messages in the middle of the day. Everything looks normal on the outside, but on the inside, it's just shattered pieces. There comes a moment when silence starts to scream. And lately, everything about him has started to feel different. There's no proof, no accusations, no weird conversations or out-of-place questions. But I can feel it. Something's changed. And even though he still smiles, hugs me, makes plans, his gaze isn't the same. I'm afraid I'm being paranoid, but it's like he's suddenly started observing me more carefully, like someone looking for answers no one dares to ask. It's not an accusing look, but one that digs. And the worst part is, when he looks at me like that, I look away. Because facing him is risking being discovered without having to say a word. The small distances started to appear, not in big ways, but in the details. He stopped kissing me with his eyes closed. He sleeps more, turned to the other side. He scrolls through his phone silently, with the screen dimmed. He used to show me everything. Now, not so much. And I get stuck in this sick spiral, trying to guess if he's changed because he knows, or if I'm just seeing reflections of my own guilt in his actions. The other day, he got home late from work, said it was traffic, but didn't explain much. I asked, just casually, and he replied, I was tired, that's it. No details, no conversation, and the silence between us got heavier than usual. That's when I started thinking, maybe he doesn't know everything, but he suspects enough to keep his distance. Human intuition is cruelly accurate, and the body speaks before the mouth. Mine must have screamed a long time ago. The fear I had of losing him is starting to be replaced by another fear, that I have already lost him, even though he's still here. Because love changes when trust is wounded, even if it's not officially broken. There's a kind of coldness that doesn't need to be announced. It settles in the space between two people, and it grows, slowly, like an invisible crack. I've tried to bring back the little rituals, making his coffee just the way he likes, sending sweet texts during the day, touching his arm while we talk, but something doesn't fit anymore, as if the gestures have lost their spontaneity. He smiles, responds, but with the timing of someone just keeping up the routine. Sometimes I think he prefers not to ask, like someone who chooses temporary ignorance to avoid inevitable pain. Maybe he's waiting for me to say it. Or maybe he's waiting for his own heart to decide if it still wants to know. And that uncertainty eats me alive, because if he knows and is staying quiet, does that mean he's already forgiven me in silence? Or that he's building up the courage to leave? The worst part is, even if he doesn't know yet, who I've become has already created a distance that didn't exist before. And that's why, even if the truth hasn't been spoken, it's already separating us. There's one night I can't get out of my head. We were watching some random movie. I was laughing at silly things, trying to seem light, normal, and out of nowhere he said, "You've changed, you know?" I froze. I asked, "Changed how?" And he just said, "I don't know. Feels like there's something you're not telling me." I laughed, made a joke, covered it up. But inside, the floor disappeared beneath me. I don't know if it was a test. I don't know if he expected a more honest reaction. But ever since then, that "feels like there's something you're not telling me" echoes in my mind. Because he's right, and with each day that passes, that something grows. Maybe he already knows, or maybe he's feeling my truth in his own body without even understanding where the unease comes from. Because love, when it's real, is intuitive, and our bodies know when they're being lied to, even if it comes wrapped in smiles and affection. He's still here, still sleeps beside me, still asks how my day was, but every gesture now comes with a new weight, as if he's waiting. And what hurts me most is knowing that when that wait ends, it might already be too late. I used to think trust was like a castle. You build it, brick by brick, with care, with time, with patience. But now I see it's more like a thread of crystal. It can bear weight, even withstand some tension. But when it breaks, there's no fixing it to bring back the original shine. When he met me, I was guarded, closed off, and he insisted. He had patience with every trauma I carried, every wall I put up. He showed me it could be different, that a safe space existed, and little by little I believed. I opened up. I gave myself over. I told him secrets from my childhood, pain I'd never shared with anyone. And now, I'm the one carrying a secret that could destroy everything he helped build in me. Some days, I look at him and see, in his eyes, the woman I used to be before all this. The woman who trusted him, and more importantly, who was worthy of his trust. That woman still lives in me, but she's locked away in a dark room, waiting for a forgiveness that may never come. The biggest illusion about trust is thinking it can be restored with a simple, "I'm sorry," as if one phrase has the power to bring back years of intimacy, innocent smiles, hands held without fear. But it doesn't. And that's what holds me back every time I think about confessing. Because I know that no matter how much he says it's okay, it will never really be okay again. I've heard stories of people who cheated, confessed, and rebuilt. But it's not that simple. Because doubt settles in. The doubt of where the person is, with whom, why they took so long to reply. The kind of doubt that silently eats away at love, and sometimes kills it without anyone noticing. When we truly love someone, we protect what we've built. But the problem in my case is, I destroyed it first, and now I'm trying to protect only the ruins, clinging to what's left, as if it's still possible to save something. The other day, while I was doing the dishes, he came up behind me, hugged me and said, "I trust you," with my eyes closed. He said it smiling, casually, like a compliment, and it broke me because he still believes, and I'm no longer who he thinks I am. Trust can't be bought, can't be forced, and most of all, can't be begged for. It's a gift. And I threw mine away. Maybe he would forgive me. Maybe with time we could rebuild. But the truth is, even then the crack would still be there. Invisible maybe, but real. And the worst part is that this crack doesn't just hurt him. It hurts me too. Because I also lost the version of him who believed in me without hesitation. His trust was the greatest gift I had, and I treated it like it was replaceable. Now, I sit at the table with him, listen to him talk about his dreams, and wonder how many of those dreams still include me. And if, deep down, I even deserve to be part of them. I know everyone has a limit. Some people forgive easily, some need time, and some simply close the door and never come back. There's no way to predict how he'd react, and maybe that's the biggest fear. Because if I were sure he'd hate me, turn his back, and push me out of his life, maybe I'd have already told him. But the possibility that he'd look at me, full of disappointment, and still say, "Stay," that possibility kills me, because it comes with eternal guilt. Sometimes I think about moving to another city, starting over somewhere new, leaving, disappearing, but then I wonder, is it even possible to run away from myself? Because no matter where I go, the woman who cheated comes with me. By the way, where are you from? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes it's comforting to know how far this story is reaching. Who knows? Maybe we live closer than we think. Anyway, I wish I could go back in time. I wish I had chosen differently. But this isn't a story about going back. It's about moving forward, with or without him, with or without forgiveness. But above all, with the awareness that once trust is broken, it never goes back to what it was. And sometimes the most painful part is when it doesn't even break on the outside, but has already crumbled inside. The worst part of carrying a secret isn't the constant weight. It's the moment you start doubting yourself, when you're no longer sure if you're postponing a tragedy or avoiding an even bigger disaster, when even silence feels too loud. I started questioning myself in ways I never imagined before. I began writing down questions in my phone's notes app, trying to organize the chaos in my head. Some of those questions broke me. Others made me realize that maybe I already knew the answers. I just didn't want to admit them. The first one was brutal. Do I want to confess out of honesty or out of cowardice? Because yes, sometimes confession wears the mask of courage, but in practice, it can be just another way to run from responsibility, to hand over the mistake and expect the other person to decide what to do with it, as if saying, "I can't deal with this, so here, now it's your problem." Another question that shook me, do I have the strength to handle what comes after? Because saying the words is one thing. Dealing with the aftermath is something else entirely. His silence, the distance, the doubt, the questions he'll ask, the nights he'll look at me and wonder if he can still trust me. Do I really have the stomach to watch him suffer for something I caused? And what if he doesn't say anything? What if he just changes, pulls away slowly, loses the light in his eyes, until one day he just stops trying altogether? Because some pain doesn't scream. It goes quiet and eats away. I also asked myself, what if he says he'd rather not know? I've heard stories like that. People who said, "I need to tell you something," and got this reply, "Don't tell me. I'd rather keep believing." That left me conflicted, because if he said that, I'd respect it, but I'd never know if he truly forgave me, or just buried the pain along with the trust. Another question that haunts me, if he had done the same, would I want him to tell me? That one cut deep, because if it were the other way around, I honestly don't know. Part of me would want to know, yes, but another part might rather live with the doubt than with the certainty of betrayal, because certainty cuts deep. Doubt, as cruel as it is, still leaves room for hope. Certainty kills it, and maybe the most painful one. If he forgives me, will I be able to forgive myself? Because right now, I'm trapped in a cycle. I feel guilty. I think about confessing. Fear paralyzes me, and then I start all over again. Even if he said, It's okay. I think I'd still feel like I owe him something, maybe for the rest of my life. There's a part of me that believes confessing is the right thing to do. But there's another part that screams that doing what's right might be the cruelest form of justice in this case. That sometimes the truth, spoken at the wrong time, can hurt more than the mistake itself. That's why I've been doing an exercise lately. Every time I feel like confessing, I ask myself, if he looked me in the eyes right now and asked, "Did you cheat on me?" would I have the courage to answer honestly? And every time so far, the answer has been no. Not because I'm not sorry, but because I'm afraid. Afraid of losing not just him, but the only version of me that I still felt proud of. That might be the greatest dilemma, to tell him and lose everything, or to stay quiet and lose myself. The hardest part is that no one can decide this for me. Everyone has their limits. Everyone has their own way of dealing with pain. And in the end, what I fear most isn't his reaction. It's what this confession might do to the way he sees me. Because right now, he still looks at me with clean, trusting eyes. And I don't know if I'm ready to watch those eyes go dark. Because of me. The silence started as a choice. Something I decided to keep out of fear, guilt, cowardice. But over time, it stopped being protection and became punishment. At first, it felt like control. As long as I don't say anything, I still have time. I still get to decide. But time passed, and silence grew like a wall between us. Now it doesn't protect me anymore. It isolates me. And worse, it makes me feel farther and farther from the woman I used to be when I was with him. Sometimes I'm with him, and out of nowhere I want to cry. He asks, "Are you okay?" And I say I am, but I'm not. I haven't been for a long time. I try to smile, try to seem light, but it's like carrying an invisible body on my back all day. And at night, when the world quiets down, that weight becomes unbearable. Omission has no sound, but it screams. It screams in forced gestures, in the pauses between words, in hugs that no longer have the same strength. Even my laughter has changed. I laugh trying to seem natural, but inside, guilt whispers that that moment no longer belongs to me. There are days when I can't even stand myself. I feel disgusted by what I'm hiding, by what I was capable of doing, and even more, by what I keep doing, lying through silence. I've thought about recording a voice note, writing a letter, but every time I start, I freeze. Fear speaks louder, and deep down, I know that as long as I don't confess, he's still mine. He's still here, still looking at me without knowing. And as cruel as that sounds, it gives me a false sense of safety. But the cost of that safety is far too high. Some nights he falls asleep and I stay awake, listening to his breathing, thinking about how the truth could change everything. Sometimes I wish he'd find out on his own, that something would happen, that life would reveal it for me, not out of malice, but because I can't take being the one who has to decide anymore. But wishing to be found out is just another kind of cowardice. It's hoping fate will do what I didn't have the courage to. And that shames me even more. I no longer know who I am in this relationship. I used to be a partner, a confidant, a support. Now I'm just a spectator in my own lie. And the more time passes, the more unbearable this role becomes. It's like living in a prison where the only key is in my pocket. But every time I think of using it, I remember that unlocking the door might mean losing everything. So I stay here, locked in, afraid to leave, but suffocating with every day that goes by. The other day he said to me, "You've been more distant. It feels like you're somewhere else." And I wanted to say, I am. I'm trapped in a world you don't know. In a mistake I made that haunts me every single day. But all that came out was, "I'm just tired." The most cowardly sentence I've ever used to hide the obvious. And he believed me. Or maybe he just pretended to. Maybe because he doesn't want to see. Or maybe because he already knows and is just waiting for me to be honest. But how do you tell the truth when your truth is a sentence? The worst part of this prison isn't the walls. It's knowing I laid every brick myself. And now I don't know how to get out. Because it's not just about telling. It's about facing what comes after. And that scares me more than anything. The truth has a strange way of showing up. Sometimes it doesn't come with drama or shouting or some explosive discovery. It comes slowly, like a scent in the air you can't ignore anymore. And before you realize it, it's already there, in the middle of the room, taking up space where silence used to live. It happened on an ordinary day. He was going through my phone, looking for a picture of us he wanted to send to his mom. I'd forgotten that an old conversation image was still saved in the chat history. It wasn't anything explicit, just a message archived from a contact saved as work friend. But the conversation, brief as it was, made the intimacy obvious, and that was enough. I saw the look on his face change as he read it. He didn't say a word, just locked the screen, handed me back the phone, and walked out of the room. My whole body froze. There was no confrontation, no "explain this to me," just silence. But this time, it was a silence full of something that had never been there before, certainty. That night, he didn't eat dinner with me, didn't sleep in our bed. He said he'd sleep in the guest room because of a headache. But I knew it wasn't physical pain. It was soul deep. The kind of pain that comes with disappointment. The kind that makes you question whether everything you've lived was real. I spent the whole night awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally replaying every detail. Every moment where I could have deleted that message, prevented that mistake, but I didn't. And now, all I could do was face what was coming. The next day, he acted normal, made coffee, asked if I wanted any, said good morning, but didn't look me in the eyes. And that hurt more than any yelling would have, because his gaze had always been my safe place. And now, it was a wall. Throughout the week, he kept his routine, but it was clear he'd changed. His words were measured, his touch was gone, his affection had turned into formality. And me? I started falling apart in silence. Truth doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. And in our case, it was already there, filling every space that used to be love. And as much as I still wanted to control the situation, it was too late. The truth, even unspoken, had taken over. He didn't need to say, I know. He didn't need to show screenshots or raise his voice. The way he simply existed next to me said it all, like someone still living in a house they no longer recognize as home. I tried starting conversations, tried to talk, but he only answered what was necessary. And every reply felt like a reminder. He's not the same anymore. I broke something inside him. And even though he's still here, he's already started to leave, realizing that was the cruelest part. Because for weeks, I had the chance to tell him, to look into his eyes and confess, to take responsibility, ask for forgiveness, and take off the armor of cowardice. But I waited. And while I waited, time did what I couldn't gather the courage to do. It revealed everything. Maybe he doesn't know the details. Maybe he's not sure what exactly happened, but he knows enough to step back, enough to protect himself from me, and that can't be undone. Betrayal never stays where it started. It spills. It spreads into every corner of the house, into the distance between bodies, into the glances that no longer meet. And even if we pretend everything's fine, there's something there, something that's already gone. Today, he's still here, but I already feel the absence. It shows up in the little things, in how long he stays out, in how he avoids talking about the future. And all I can do now is face what I created. Because no matter how deeply I say I regret it, the truth is already here, and truth always collects its price, even when it's never said out loud. The worst part of when the truth comes to light is realizing it doesn't need to be shouted to hurt. Sometimes it arrives like a cold breeze between two bodies that were once warm. Sometimes it's the way someone looks at you, the delay in their response, the touch that no longer happens. After that day, when he saw the message on my phone, there was no fight, no direct question, no accusation, just silence. A new kind of silence. Thick, hard to break through. And that, contrary to what I imagined, was what broke me the most. He stayed, slept at home, ate with me, even talked politely. But there was an invisible distance, a space between us I didn't know how to fill, as if time was passing in a room with no air. The routine continued, but the connection didn't. Over breakfast, he talked about traffic, a bit of news, the meeting he had later, and I replied, trying to seem calm. But I knew it was all just formality, like two roommates keeping things civil. Only in our case, that used to be love. I watched his eyes as he spoke, those eyes that, for so long, were my safe harbor. They were still there, but distant. He didn't look at me the same way. There was something new in them, a mix of disappointment and indifference that hurt more than any shout ever could. I started paying attention to everything, the times he left, the way he handled his phone, the way he avoided any spontaneous physical contact. He wasn't being aggressive. He wasn't cold. It was worse. He was being too polite, like someone keeping up appearances because they'd already given up trying to fix what was broken. And me, I became a spectator to it all. I knew at any moment he could call me to talk, say he knew, that he wanted to understand, or that he wanted to leave, but he said nothing. And with each passing day, his silence became heavier than the guilt I was carrying alone. At first, I expected the confrontation. I thought he'd come at me with rage, questions, demanding explanations. But over time I understood. He didn't want explanations. He wanted distance. And that choice was even harder to swallow, because there was no chance to defend myself, no opportunity to say I regretted it. He had already judged, and the verdict was emotional withdrawal. One night, while he was in the shower, I saw his phone vibrate, a message from a mutual friend. She said, "Are you okay? I noticed you've been distant." My heart sank. He wasn't just pulling away from me. He was pulling away from everyone, as if collecting the pieces of himself, trying to survive the pain he wouldn't let himself express. And I sat there on the couch, watching it all happen, wanting to speak, to scream, to beg for forgiveness. But every time I thought about opening my mouth, it felt like I didn't have a voice anymore. Like by waiting so long, I'd lost the right to be heard. One Saturday, he left early, without saying where he was going. He came back late in the afternoon, with tired eyes and an empty look. I asked if he was okay. He said, "I've been thinking about changing some things in my life," just that. Didn't even look at me. Went up to the bedroom and stayed there until bedtime. And I kept hearing that phrase over and over. I've been thinking about changing some things in my life. The feeling was clear. He didn't yet know if he was leaving, But he knew he couldn't stay like this, and that was the beginning of the end. Living together turned into a minefield. Every conversation was measured, every gesture calculated. He still treated me with respect, but it was a cold kind of respect, without touch, without intention. And maybe that was the hardest part, realizing he didn't want to hurt me. He just couldn't keep pretending things were fine. I started sleeping poorly, eating less, avoiding going out. My whole body responded to the growing anguish. And even though I knew I needed to speak, needed to let it out, my voice just wouldn't come. Not because I feared he'd leave, but because I feared confirming what was already true. He wasn't mine anymore. At times, he even tried to be kind. He'd ask if I needed help with something, if I was tired. But it was distant care, almost like a stranger who sees someone fall on the street and offers a hand out of courtesy. There was no love left in the gesture. Just humanity. And then one night I realized the silence wasn't just mine anymore. He looked at me, waiting for me to speak. I looked at him, waiting for him to ask. And neither of us did anything, because we both knew whatever word came out would be final. And that paralyzed us. That was the hardest part. Realizing that the truth, even unspoken, had already done its work. It had already eaten away the space between us. It had already dulled the light in our eyes. And now, all that remained was this. Two bodies close, with souls locked in separate rooms. The betrayal began as an act, became guilt, then silence. And now, it's absence. Not a physical absence, but the absence of us, of what we were, of what we still could have been. And in that moment I knew. The waiting was running out. Either I spoke, or he would leave, without ever giving me the chance to explain. I didn't plan to tell him. Not that day. Not like that. But there are moments when the body speaks before the mind allows it. And that late afternoon, when he walked through the door with tired eyes, something inside me gave out. He dropped his backpack in the corner of the room, took off his shoes, glanced at me briefly, and went straight to the bedroom. No kiss, no hi, no contact. That had become our new routine. Cold, silent coexistence, as if we were guests sharing the same roof, going through the motions. Only that night felt different. I could feel it. The air was heavier, the silence more brutal. I walked into the room slowly. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head down, fidgeting with his fingers. He looked nervous, or maybe just tired of waiting for a truth I should have spoken long ago. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to gather courage. But it wasn't courage I lacked. It was strength to accept what would come next. Because from the moment I spoke, everything would change. I knew that. I couldn't hide behind routine anymore. Couldn't pretend the space between us was just a rough patch. I sat beside him, kept my hands on my legs, still, cold with sweat. I need to tell you something. My voice came out low, almost a whisper. But maybe you already know. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the floor, then finally said, without looking at me, I've been waiting for you to say it for a long time. That broke me. The confirmation that he knew, or felt, was worse than any accusation. The fact that he'd lived with me for weeks, slept beside me, had coffee with me, knowing and waiting. I made a mistake, I continued, and I can't justify it. It happened during a time when we were in a bad place. I was feeling alone, vulnerable, and I let myself go. I spoke calmly, without defending myself, without playing the victim. I told him everything, every detail he needed to know. No embellishments, no softeners, just the truth. Because in that moment, I understood it wasn't about saving the relationship. It was about stopping the lie. He listened silently, didn't interrupt, didn't turn away. But his body was tense, his fingers clenched, and his breathing was heavy, sharp. When I finished, he stayed quiet for a while, then stood up, walked to the window, and stood there, back to me. The light of the setting sun hit his back, casting a long shadow across the bedroom floor. You know what hurts the most? He said softly, still facing away. It's not what you did. It's what you kept doing after. I don't understand. You looked me in the eyes. You hugged me, slept with me, heard me make plans, and even so, you said nothing. I wanted to respond, say I tried, that I almost told him, that I didn't have the strength, but I stayed quiet, because anything I said would sound like an excuse, and he didn't want excuses. He wanted truth. He wanted pain. He wanted the full weight of what I had done. He sat back down, looked at me for a few seconds. His eyes were different, tired, wounded, but clear. If it were me, he asked, if I had done it, would you forgive me? I took a while to answer, looked at him, feeling my stomach twist. I don't know, maybe not. I was honest. He nodded, like he already expected that answer, then crossed his arms and said something I'll never forget. I'm not angry, not yet, but I'm exhausted. Exhausted from pretending, from waiting, from trying to understand what you were trying to do with all of this. I am too, I said. Tired of hiding. Tired of watching you try to love me without knowing if you still can. Tired of sleeping next to you with a knot in my chest. Then why'd you wait so long? Because I was afraid of losing you. He gave a bitter smile. And now? Now. I took a deep breath. I'll accept whatever you decide. He stood again, walked to the bedroom door, stood there for a moment, then came back and said, I need some time. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I need to get out of here. Think. Breathe away from this. That's okay. I'm not promising anything. Not that I'll come back. Not that I'll stay. But I promise I'll be honest with you, the way you should have been with me from the beginning. I nodded. The tears fell, but I didn't cry in despair. It was different. It was as if I'd finally let myself hit rock bottom and realized that, despite all the fear, the pain of the truth was less suffocating than the guilt of silence. The next morning he packed a bag, took the car, left without saying how long he'd be gone, and I stayed, alone, in the same house, with the same routine, but for the first time, without the weight of the lie. It wasn't an ending, at least not yet, but it was definitely the beginning of something. Maybe the end. Maybe a different kind of restart. I didn't know. I just knew that, after hiding for so long behind omission, I was finally facing the real consequences of what I did, and that, as much as it hurt, was also freedom. The days that followed were what really hurt, not the confession, not his reaction, not even the moment he walked out with a backpack, saying he needed time. What truly hurt was what came after, the silence that lingers even after you've told everything. I thought that after speaking up, the worst would be over, that the weight would lift off my shoulders, that there would be relief, that the suffering would become clear, and maybe after that some light. But it wasn't like that. What came was a strange emptiness, like being at the bottom of a well, where the only voice is the echo of your own guilt. I spent my days waiting for the sound of a notification, a message, a question, any sign that he was still processing things, still considering me, still weighing the possibility of coming back. But nothing came, and as the hours passed, that nothing began to carry its own meaning. I started to understand that sometimes silence is the answer. Not because the person wants to hurt you, but because they no longer know what to say, because any word would feel too small for the damage done, because whatever feeling is left no longer knows how to find its way back. In the first few weeks, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. Woke up, made coffee, opened the window, tended to the plants on the balcony, worked, replied to messages, tidied up the house. But inside, everything was frozen. Life kept moving. I just didn't go with it. I missed the little noises, the sound of his flip-flops in the hallway, the muffled laughter in the middle of the night, the sound of the shower running while he sang without realizing. I missed the simple presence, the shared routine, even in silence. Because now, the silence that remained was different. It was pure absence. I thought about reaching out, sending a message, saying I understood, that I respected his time, but that I was still here, ready to listen if he had something to say. But I didn't have the courage, because deep down, I knew. If he wanted to talk, he already would have. Not knowing what he's feeling has been one of the harshest punishments. I, who kept a secret for weeks, now found myself begging for a scrap of truth. I wanted to know if he was angry, missing me, pitying me, indifferent. Any feeling would have been better than this shapeless silence. And then came the dreams. I dreamt of him coming back, of him walking through the door saying he wanted to try again, that he missed me, that he still loved me, even if he was hurt. I'd wake up with a racing heart, teary eyes, trembling hands, and the empty side of the bed reminded me, in seconds, that it was just a dream. Other times, I dreamt of him leaving for good, of him looking into my eyes and saying he couldn't forgive me, that he had someone new, that he was happy. Those dreams hurt more, but they brought a strange kind of closure. Like, at least in that space, I had a clear answer. But real life doesn't offer that kind of clarity. It offers blanks. Unfinished situations, people who disappear without goodbye, feelings that die without a funeral, and it's up to us to decide how to live with the gaps. I tried writing about what I was feeling, filling notebooks with sentences that made sense, but the truth is, after he left, the words started losing strength. There was no more speech, no more story, just an internal silence, like even my guilt was tired of repeating the same apologies inwardly. There was one specific day, a Sunday, when everything felt clearer. I was organizing a drawer and found a note he had left me months ago, long before everything. It was simple, handwritten, in his always slightly crooked handwriting. It said, "Thank you for being my place in the world." I read that sentence 10 times. I didn't cry, I just stared. And in that little piece of paper, I felt the full weight of what I'd lost, because he was my place too, and I destroyed it. From that day forward, something changed in me. Not that the pain disappeared, but it stopped being just pain and became something closer to reality. Acceptance, maybe. Understanding. I started going through the house with a different energy. I folded the clothes he left, set aside the books that weren't mine, took his toothbrush out of the bathroom. I didn't throw anything away, not out of attachment, but because now I understood. Each of those things was part of a story that existed, that was real, that was worth it, even with the painful ending. Because yes, loving someone, even if you made a mistake, even if you lost them, is still love, and that's what stays with me now. The love that still exists, but for the first time, doesn't ask for anything in return, only respect. Today, I no longer wait for him to message me. If he does, it'll be his choice. If he doesn't, that'll be his choice too. What I needed to say, I said. What I needed to face, I faced. And now, his absence isn't a void anymore. It's a scar. And scars, even ugly, even sensitive, mean that pain passed through there, but didn't stay. It took weeks before I stopped counting the days since he left. At first, it was automatic. Today makes 3 days. 1 week. It's been 15 days since he spoke to me. It was like each number helped me measure the size of the silence, but after a while, the days stopped being numbers. They became scenery, and I stopped counting. Because the truth is, he never came back. Not to get his things, not to say it was over, and not to say it wasn't. He just didn't come back. And that absence, over time, stopped being a waiting space and became a new territory. Mine. I'm not proud of what I did, and I didn't bury myself in the mistake either. What happened, happened, and what came after was consequence. Fair, harsh, but deserved. For a long time, I thought losing someone because of a mistake was the worst punishment. But it's not. The worst punishment is living with the version of yourself that was capable of hurting someone you loved. That takes a long time to heal. In the beginning, I thought it would be enough to feel regret, confess, apologize. I thought the weight would lift with the truth. But what no one tells you is, the truth doesn't ease the pain right away. It hurts first, it burns, it cuts deep. Only later, much later, does it begin to make sense. And that's what happened to me. It took me a long time to stop replaying the night of the betrayal. Every detail, every wrong move, every choice I could have made differently. And then even longer to stop replaying the day I told him, his face, the silence, the pain. But over time, the repetition lost power. And what remained was the raw reality. He left, not out of impulse, not out of revenge, but because he needed to protect himself. And I understand that. Now, more than ever, I understand. It's strange how we only really learn to see the other person when we've already lost them. I thought I knew him, thought I knew what he could handle, what he'd forgive, but I didn't. Because when trust is broken, the person you once knew changes too, and that's what happened to him, and to me. Once I stopped waiting for an answer, I started reorganizing my life. Not the practical side. That was the easiest part. The hard part was reorganizing the memories, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I took some photos off the wall. Others, I stored in a box. A few, I left where they were. Because even after everything, the good moments were still real. The love existed. And just because it didn't end how I wanted, doesn't mean it wasn't worth it. I started going out more, walking in the late afternoon, sitting in cafes, reading or writing, and little by little, I began to notice people again. I saw couples laughing, arguing softly, hugging in the street, and I realized how many times we'd been like that too. Did it hurt? Yes, but it also brought peace, because I understood that love doesn't have to last, to have value. It can end and still be real. One of those afternoons, I sat on a bench and wrote something I never published, never sent, never shared. I just wrote, "Today, I understand that losing you was the price I paid for not having the courage to be honest at the right time. But I also understand that continuing to lie would have cost me even more. I would have lost myself entirely. I chose the truth too late, but I chose it. And because of that, I'm at peace, in pain, but at peace." After that, I stopped writing for him. I started writing for myself, about what I learned, about what I never want to repeat, about how his absence revealed parts of me I'd been ignoring for years. One of those parts is my habit of avoiding hard conversations, of pretending pain will pass on its own, of keeping everything quiet so no one gets hurt, when, in the end, silence only hurts more. Another is the constant need for control, wanting to decide when, how, and if the truth comes out, when in reality, the truth has its own timing. And if you don't have the courage to speak it, life will find a way to scream it for you. Today, I understand that living with guilt is like carrying an invisible suitcase. You can walk, work, smile, but it's always there, weighing down every step. And when you finally let it go, you realize the pain wasn't in what it carried, but in the fear of opening it. And I opened it. Late, but I opened it. If I could go back in time, I would have been honest from the beginning. I would have had the courage to say I messed up before he had to find out on his own. I would have faced the pain with him, not against him. But time doesn't go back. Only we do, changed or not. He still hasn't come back, and I still don't know if he ever will. But for the first time since it all happened, that answer doesn't define me anymore, because I've learned that life isn't just made of those who stay. It's made of what stays after someone leaves, and what stayed was growth, respect for myself, even with all my flaws. The truth, raw, painful, but freeing, and the understanding that love, no matter how beautiful, can't survive without truth or courage. Now, I move forward, not as someone waiting, not as someone drowning in guilt, but as someone who understands love can end and still be what saved me. Because in the end, the biggest betrayal isn't against another person, it's against your own truth. And when you delay the inevitable, the price only grows. Sometimes, the pain of truth is the only path back to dignity, even if you lose everything along the way. If you carry a story that still hurts, or one that saved you, leave your best email in the comments. Who knows, maybe your experience will become a video like this one, to touch other lives and turn silence into strength.